Hey there, today I want to show you Kingdom IDE. This is a really simple pet project that I've just been working on for fun. It's an IDE. The goal of it is to solve two major problems. The first is visualizing what my agents are working on, so that when I have a bunch working on different things, I can know what that is without really having to read all of the files. And the second is to make it a lot easier to interact and understand isolation for different agents. So this is maybe an IDE or an agent harness, whatever you want to call it. This is going to be a long-term kind of deep dive video. If you want something more concise, there's a blog post in the description that will have just the highlights, the general info. Okay, so let's jump in and use it. This is it running locally on my machine. The first thing you'll notice is that we have a world here. This is my dev folder, so it has all my dev projects in it. And I can zoom in and take a look. So let's look at this test Agora project. And this is the first part of understanding what the agent is doing and where it's working. And so I wanted to have a visualization. This is why it's called Kingdom. You have each town has basically town borders here. And then each of these buildings is a file, a real file inside of your project. And the size of the file, right, its area, corresponds to how many lines it has. And then the driveway size here is how many connections it has to the rest of your project. So you can see that this style.css only has like one connection. It's very low. And you can see our agents working here. And this is going to work very similarly kind of to Claude Code or Copilot or whatever tools you might be using. Let's actually walk through a change. So I'm going to ask it to make some changes, to make some obnoxious animations or effects. Now, this is the part about isolation where I wanted to make it really clear of what's isolated and what's being managed. So if you have this isolation tooltip here, you can go and open it up. I'm going to choose that the agent uses its own network. So it's going to open up port 3000 locally, and it's not going to affect anything on my network. Similar to containers if you've ever used containers. And then I'm going to say, use your own file system. But I want you to include some of the stuff. Like, for example, I already have Cargo installed. I already have a bunch of local tools like UV, and I want you to access the records of past plans and what other agents are working on. So yeah, I want to give you access to all that stuff. I don't want you to build your entire own file system and pollute that. I just want you to be, ephemeral in your own spot. So I'm going to hit start, and it's going to start working on this. And this is where you've probably very much seen something like this and you're already using it, which is great. It can go and answer tasks and make changes. It can run a browser and do that. That's all awesome. But here's where I like it, and I think it's gotten a little more powerful for me, is that I can go ahead and open up this terminal. Let's clear it. And I'm going to run npm run start. You can see that it is running that app on port 3000, and it's using localhost to access some database. What that's doing is it's running in this isolated context, and I can go and access it. So I'm going to open this up in a new tab. I'm going to throw it over to that workspace, and let's, for fun, open up this one as well. I think I already have this running. Yeah. And what is great about this is that if I go here, I can go and interact with this app. So like, I can send messages and these can talk to each other, but they are all running. It's very isolated. So if I go and open up, for example, my WSL instance, this is where I'm running everything, right? All of this project is running inside of my Linux instance on my Windows machine. If I go ahead and I go to that folder, Agora, and I run npm run start, it'll actually give me an error. Well, it gives me an error address is in use, which is good because that's where I'm hosting my agent right now. So you can see I don't have to worry about reprogramming my projects to say, grab this port or worry about access. It's all done very easily. And that's the goal of this IDE, to make it easy of what's using what. And you can see that's visualized here. I have these agents. They are all working and accessing this shared database, this well, which helps me understand, what is being shared and what isn't. And so I can go ahead and, let's accept that proposal and let that work. And let's go here and take a look at what that could actually be used for. So I want to call out that this is, if I go to /app, that's where all of my files are. And if I go to my dev folder, right, I have access to my UV tools or anything like that. I have access to all these tools that I gave it. But if I go to dev, I don't have access to the rest of my developer projects. So I'm really want to make sure that my agent can't go nuts and mess around with other stuff. You see, it can't go mess with all of this code because it is isolated in its own way. And it's not a Docker container because it doesn't have its own full base, right? It's not running something else. It's just running everything just using namespaces in a separated spot on its own. So it's super lightweight, trying not to be really heavy on your system. I love Docker and I love Linux containers. Shout out to WSL container. And but I don't want a lot of different containers all running simultaneously on my system because I don't need them to all have different, base file systems. I want them to kind of just share the same tools that I have. So I want to have a more complex sharing story for that. So you can see here that it's testing it. And what's cool as well about this, another cool thing that I like, is that this gives me kind of consistent access between my agents to the same data. So you can see that that same message that I sent earlier, right, is now being tested by this agent. So use cases where I've used this are things like, hey, can you go check what that other agent is doing? It's able to access some of the conversations of that agent while still maintaining its fully owned independent workspace and code, right? You can see there's 3 versions of this project right now that are on my disk, and they have their 3 networking stacks. They have their own 3 file stacks. It's as if they're all on separate computers, but able to talk to each other, which I think is pretty powerful. So now that some work has been done, let's talk about the visualization aspect of this. So that's kind of we talked about isolation, now visualization. One of the key parts of what I wanted to do with this is understand what my agents were working on without really having to read all their code. And so I can see the style sheet. There's a lot of changes being done, and you can see even the amount of changes that are being done per agent. And you can see that even this same agent that's changing this big block of style is also going to change the JavaScript, while this one here that is going to change the flower theme is also going to change the HTML. Where this comes really in handy is if I'm looking at like a real project. So I actually program this editor using itself, which is pretty nice. But I get a really quick and good understanding about neighborhoods. And so I can tell you that this neighborhood here is the folder for rendering, for viewing the visualization on the map. I just know that because humans are really good at spatial awareness, not necessarily folder awareness. And I can say, oh, in this neighborhood, you can see this is the meshes building. We added some meshes for this request, right? Over here, mountains around the rim of the disk, which makes sense. We had to have meshes for that. And we'd have to spawn those mountains for that. And I can see the other valuable piece of information is that these are not intersecting with each other. So I can merge these two without fear because they are not basically colliding. And I can see as well that over here, this stop telling the court to pick an unusual port request is deleting some files for this folder, or deleting some lines from this file, and then adding others. And you combine that with all the other rich information you get. So for example, this is our API file. You can see it as a huge driveway because it gets referenced a lot. Whereas some of these teeny little files over here, like highlight or agent turns, don't get really referenced by many. And so the visualization part here is really useful because I'm able to say, like, this is where all of the views are. I just know that that neighborhood there is there. And so I can tell when my agent is kind of running amok or doing something I wouldn't like, because if it's going and touching, hundreds of files over here in visualization, when I've asked it only to do something with, updating the chat box, I can immediately tell that and say where it's conflicting. So I find that incredibly helpful. And then while you're actually using it, it will zoom in to the different files and show you in the bottom left, just as a kind of helpful reminder. So you really get to learn what's going on in your city. And of course, again, all the other features are here. So for example, if I'm reviewing this and I say, okay, please change the name of the struct. For example, I'm able to do full code reviews with my agent. Let's go ahead and tell it to do something else and remove this test. So I can go and give it notes, send those to it. It's just a very comfortable environment. And I can go and leave this and then go work on something else. And so that is really the full extent. The last bit I would show is you can obviously make your own shared resources. It's very easy. You can just git clone and point an agent to get set up with this. This is available on GitHub at the link below. And I would try it out. And then if it seems cool, then leave an issue or leave a pull request. Would love to see it. Thanks for tuning in.